Hello and happy Friday, and thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org and this show in particular. Correct me if I'm Norm. I'm your host, Norm. I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Mr. Brian Rooney. Brian, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Gorgeous day today.
It is, finally.
Yeah, thanks for being back here in the dark, dank studio of RadioFreeRhinecliff.org.
This is cool. I like this.
Where we're in the middle of our fundraiser. I'm just going to get the plug in right away. And you can go to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org and click on the Donate Now button because they're raising money for equipment and new seats. Are you comfortable in that chair?
No, I'm.
Yeah, see?
The interviewee is supposed to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, there you go.
So you can take advantage of them.
RadioFreeRhinecliff.org, donate now. Brian, you've spent your life, and I said in the thing, like even more than your life, sort of in journalism.
Yes.
How did you choose that path?
Well, it was the family business.
Right.
My father had been a war correspondent in World War II.
Right.
And, went into, he didn't immediately do journalism in New York, but he was in that world. And his best friends were, Walter Cronkite was his best friend, and Walter used to come to dinner, and Harry Reasoner was his friend. And so I grew up with this world of journalism, and it just looked like a great way to live. These people traveled everywhere, met people, saw things, did things. It was just a very attractive way to live.
Right. Did it seem romantic? Did it seem like a good living? And all of the above?
No, not immediately. It was not. Ultimately, it turned out to be a good living, but it was tough early on. I made nothing, and most journalists don't make a lot of money. And I wish I had been more interested in money, but
right.
That wasn't the point. It was to be able. I love to write. I love to be out in the world and see things and meet people, and it was a way to be myself,
right?
And make a living.
And for people who don't know, your dad's name.
My father was Andy Rooney, the guy at the end of 60 Minutes.
Right.
So which
is what I really knew him for. I didn't know him as a war correspondent or.
I think. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about him.
No.
Enough about it. But I think he had very serious origins.
Right.
And he, as a correspondent, he flew 5 missions in a B-17. He landed at Normandy and followed the war across Europe. He was tent mates with Ernie Pyle, the famous
right.
war correspondent. So he was serious about human life. And I always told people when he was doing his thing on 60 Minutes, just because he made you laugh, don't think he was joking.
Right.
That he had serious observations about human life.
Right.
But being around him, and he didn't get famous until I was well into my adulthood, but being around him and his friends and acquaintances made me want to do the same thing.
Right, and the friends acquaintances you mentioned, like Walter Cronkite and these people, that must have been kind of cool as a kid.
Yeah.
To be a kid hanging out with these grown-ups.
Yes.
Who you were also seeing on TV.
Yeah.
And so you went to college. You studied journalism.
No, I studied English and history. I went to Colgate University. There was no journalism major.
Okay.
We had a very good student newspaper, the Colgate Maroon. And we had some really good years of people who worked for the paper. I ran the paper with Gloria Borger, you see on CNN a lot. She's one of the panelists on the commentary. Steve Lohr is at the New York Times still. A guy named Michael Hiltzik, who won a Pulitzer for the LA Times. And they were all at Colgate, at the Colgate Maroon at the time. And great origins.
Amazing. And did you cover any particular kinds of stuff for the Colgate Maroon?
No, we did everything. The big thing I did was I found out that the guys in the hockey house had gang raped a sophomore girl.
Oh boy!
And I wrote about it, and they got closed down.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you wrote about, you broke the story.
She talked to me, and told me what happened, and I wrote the story.
Yeah. And was there any like moment of hesitation? I mean, you understood what the ramifications would be, and that you would probably be maligned.
I was, and I was in a mild bit of danger. There was a period of time I was friends with the guys in the football house, and they would stay close to me when I was downtown.
Oh, that's good to protect you from the guys in the hockey house.
Yeah. And there was sort of a history there because I had been a hockey player as a freshman.
Right.
And I was the only member of the freshman hockey team who was not invited to join the hockey house. And, I used to say it was because I knew how to read. And I was a walk-on. I played,
Right.
I used to read books on the team bus. And there were other guys who, were students as well. But the guys I was different from the guys who were recruited to play hockey. And some of them were pretty rough characters.
Right. So did they get expelled and kicked out of the house and off the team?
The house was closed down. Nobody was expelled. I was not happy with the result of it all.
Criminal charges?
No.
That's unfortunate. But still, what an amazing thing to break a story like that.
Yeah.
And sort of knowing that it's the right thing to do, but that doing the right thing is going to put you in some kind of danger.
Yeah.
And did they, like, were there active threats? Did you have, like, letters under your door?
Some verbal threats.
Right.
Directly, to my face. But I don't know. I wasn't that worried. And I was an athlete myself. It's not as if I was a wimp, so I wasn't all that scared.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. So one of the things I read in your bio is that you've been threatened another time by, you were covering like the mobsters up in Rochester. Is that it?
There was a period of time during my time in Rochester when there was a mafia war was going on. These two factions, and one faction was bombing the gambling clubs owned by the other faction, and then they kept attempting to assassinate this guy named Sammy Gingello. His name was Sammy G, and
that's a good name.
They were planting bombs outside this place Sammy used to hang out, named Ben's Cafe Society, and eventually they did kill him. They blew him up, and I ended up covering federal court, and these guys, because they used bombs, the case ended up in federal court. And early on, there was a little guy named Angelo Vaccaro, who was a classic old school mobster who would wear the black chalk striped shirts or suits,
right,
with a black shirt and a white tie. And the first or second day of the trial, Angelo comes up to me in the hallway out of the courtroom, and he pokes me in the chest. He'd read the newspaper. And he says, "Why don't you get yourself a new job?"
All right. So once again, a lesser man would be like, maybe I will get a new job. But
well, no, because
they
ended up, the whole bunch of, they were killers. They had killed people.
Yeah.
But they ended up being very friendly. One of them, a guy named, what was his name? Rossetto. He and his wife would invite me with what the Italians called gravy, which
right,
is marinara sauce.
Yeah.
But anyway, Angelo Vaccaro, eventually we got to be kind of friendly. And a couple of things happened. And one day he comes in the suit and the white tie. And I said to him, I said, Angelo, nobody dresses like this anymore.
Oh, nice. So you kind of had a death wish.
But then one day, this isn't too off color, I go in and I'm standing at the urinal, and Angelo comes in and stands next to me. And he looks up at me and he says, Brian, I'm going to be needing prostate surgery. And I don't want to have to get it in the joint.
Right. And so did he end up getting it in the joint?
They all did. They,
right,
they denied it. I never got over this. They all denied it the entire time.
It being like blowing up there.
Yeah, that they had done this thing.
Yeah.
And there was a guy named Billy Barton, and they said the jury's got a verdict, and Billy Barton says to me, he says, "You just watch. We're going to be out of here in minutes." And go in the courtroom. The jury hasn't come in yet. This guy just told me this. We're going to be out of here. He summons his wife over. He's on the other side of the bar. He takes off his watch. pulls out his wallet, his ring, and he hands them to her. And the jury came in, and they all went away.
Wow. Amazing. So did you revisit stories sort of as a matter of course in your career? Sort of certain stories, sort of like the Times used to have a follow-up in the news section.
Someday, if you were doing things that there would be things that you required you to follow up. Criminal things. I didn't do a whole lot with O.J. Simpson, but I covered O.J. Simpson. There were things when I was working in Providence. There was a lot of corruption in Providence,
right?
And it was actually it was just wonderful. And the corruption was like ripe fruit on the trees. And that was when that guy Buddy Cianci was the mayor of Providence.
Oh, right, I remember.
And I broke this story. He had sent his police driver down to pick up his wife's lover. Buddy's wife had a lover who ran a contracting company. And police driver goes and picks him up and takes the guy up to Buddy Cianci's carriage house up on College Hill. And Buddy proceeds to beat him up and urinate on him. And, kind of long story short, I was able to get that story on the air. And Buddy was indicted and ended up resigning from office.
Well, that sounds like the kind of story that would result in another threat to your general health.
No, that one didn't. And it's funny because I did a lot of corruption stories and nobody ever threatened me. Somebody, and I never found out who it was, used to call me up anonymously. And he'd say, check out the Busy Bee Construction Company. So I'd go down to Public Works and look at invoices and stuff like that. And they'd kind of play this game with you. Like tipsters always want you to like solve the puzzle. They won't just tell you.
Right.
Here's what happened. They give you a tip and you got to follow the trail. And so the Busy Bee Construction Company, among other things, they did snow plowing contracts for the city. So I go through the invoices, and they would bill by license number. And I look at it, and okay, license number what? So I go up to the State House, and I start looking up the license numbers. And they were billing snow plowing for things like a Volkswagen Beetle and a Ford Pinto. And it turns out that they were just picking license plates off the street and putting it on a bill.
Oh, jeez.
They, the year Buddy was being reelected, somebody calls me up and says, check out the sidewalks. So they were building new sidewalks.
So was it always the same voice on the
Yes,
tipster?
there was one guy, never knew who he was.
Right.
And check out the sidewalks. So I go out, and they were building laying new sidewalks in areas where people were likely to vote for Buddy. And I'm walking up and down the sidewalks, and I'm thinking, what? So what about the sidewalks? Well, by accident, when I was in college, I had worked as a dispatcher for a concrete company.
Get the hell out of here.
And I knew something about the specifications of sidewalks. So I went to Public Works, got the bills. Concrete was billed by cubic yardage, and billed to a X number of cubic yards for a city block. And then I went out there, I got a 100-foot tape measure. I measured the sidewalks and compared it to the cubic yardage, and they were coming up something like 40% overbilled just on surface measurement alone. And then it turns into this big scandal, and they do an investigation and do core drillings, and they find out that the sidewalks are thinner than specification too. Anyway, it was a lot of fun.
Huh. And yeah, it seems like it was fun. I mean, when you mentioned, a lot of corruption in Providence, your eyes sort of lit up. And I thought, that's just got to be a good thing for a journalist. Like, oh boy, there's so much corruption. There's so many stories here.
Oh yeah. You dream of stuff like that. Yeah.
So you'd hear about something terrible happening. You'd be like, oh, that's a shame. And your second thing would be like, oh, that's going to be a great story.
That's a little bit the dark side of journalism.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
And so it's been 40 years of that dynamic.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's a terrible thing. I'm so sorry to hear that. And it's going to be a great story. I hope I get a scoop.
Yeah.
And has that been difficult to deal with at all? Seeing that sort of dark side of journalism, that duality, and
well, you'd have to ask my wife. I am aware. You see a lot of things. I mean, I've seen people shot to death, burned to death. I've seen an execution. I've been to war zones. So when you are a journalist and you do those things, you can't have a reaction. You've got to go back. You've got to report on it, and it's not a good thing for you.
Right.
But you get this professional demeanor and you do it.
Right. Well, you can't let the reaction get in the way, right?
Right.
And I imagine you become inured a little bit to these kinds of horrific events.
Yes. And you also, there's a false tendency to think, well, I'm not really here. I'm not part of this. I'm just a witness. So,
right.
A couple times I was in the middle of gunfights, and it happened so suddenly, but you still have this feeling like, oh, well, they're not shooting at me.
Right. So being there in the moment, you try to not get dragged down into the enormity of these things, but still emotionally you're feeling it.
I'm afraid to say I did not get too emotional about it. I kept
you're not aware of getting
separation.
too emotional about it.
Yeah.
And so did you ever at some point think, oh, I should really seek professional help for my mental health?
No.
During all that? No.
No.
But you've seen so much stuff. What do you think is probably the most horrific thing you've witnessed?
There is no single most.
Okay.
I think little things stick out in things that you've seen. A child, the eyes of a dead child.
Right.
Or I witnessed an execution in San Quentin, and I never got over it that they brought this guy in, huge guy, muscly, and
gang member.
LA gang member, and he hopped up on the table and laid down.
It was by lethal injection?
Yeah. But no fussing. I never got over it that he just got up on the table.
Right. Yeah, when I asked what was the most horrific thing, and you said you've seen killed and stuff, I would think an execution, just sort of a state-sanctioned taking of a life.
Yes, because on other occasions I didn't really see it coming.
Right.
But then I knew, they were sending me to San Quentin, and I knew what I was going to see.
Right. And who sent you there?
ABC News.
Okay. And you were a West Coast correspondent for ABC News.
I was based in Los Angeles for a little over 22 years.
Wow.
We covered the West from Denver to out in the Pacific and Canada, Mexico.
Right.
Huge area.
So back to San Quentin, you're there, I'm guessing, with this guy's family and maybe some other gang members. Who was there witnessing this?
There were some women. I never got to talk to them. There was somebody there in support of him. Mostly it was press and official witnesses.
Right.
A lot of press. Maybe at least 15, maybe more.
Right. And so when you went into that, did you have an idea of what angle you wanted to pursue to make your coverage of it different and better than other people's coverage?
I don't think, when you're going to an event in which everybody pretty much sees the same thing, you're not going to get much of a different angle or take on things. I ended up on, Good Morning America describing what I had seen, and probably everybody else pretty much did the same thing.
Right. You said somewhere in your biography online, or somebody else did of you, he likes to get away from the back. And then they quote you, when I'm where everyone else is, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Loved that. I loved that idea for a journalist to just find a different angle, a different point of view on the story, on this thing that everybody else is seeing.
Or, or just doing different stories. Because I did a lot of, hard news, breaking news, but it wasn't my favorite thing. I really loved doing the offbeat things, feature stories, telling about people and things that you didn't know anything about. I think I told you about some of those, we found in a firehouse in California, there was a light bulb that had been burning for 100 years. Or we went to the World Pond Hockey Championships in Plaster Rock, New Brunswick, I think it was.
Right.
Stuff like that I really loved doing.
Right. So 22 years in L.A., and then you moved back east, which is where you're from.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to move back here?
We have 2 daughters, and they both went to college in the East, and they graduated and started working. And we asked them, do you plan to go back to Los Angeles? Because my wife and I were both from the East. Cecile's from Long Island. I was from Connecticut.
The daughters were raised in L.A.?
Yeah, they were all raised in L.A., and they
there.
said they had no intention of going back. So we said, we're moving east.
Wow. Why did they have no intention of going back?
I think they got, I don't know, LA is a different thing. They didn't have an interest in going into the entertainment business or something like that. They fell in love with New York City and Brooklyn, and the life they find here. So we're pleased about that.
And are either of them journalists?
No. One of them is a writer.
Okay.
She writes for, I always get the name wrong, but it's the American Foundation for the Prevention of Suicide. She
that's
writes
nice.
Their communications and literature and stuff like that.
And your wife's a writer?
Yes.
And do you think of yourself as a writer first and sort of a journalist as just a secondary descriptor?
No, I guess, yeah. Writer is more a higher rank than journalist,
is it?
I think.
All right, then I've got to ask, do you do any writing outside of journalistic writing?
I've been pecking away at a memoir for quite a while. I have about 250 pages of it that I need to finish, but that's primarily what I do. At one point, and I still have it, I was working with an actor in Los Angeles on a one-man show in which this guy played the character of my father.
Oh, boy.
I wrote a whole play on that. I kind of let that go fallow.
Uh-huh.
If there are any producers out there who want to pick it up and
Interesting.
Put it on Broadway.
Now, Saturday Night Live had 2 or 3 people playing your father over the years.
Well, that's an easy get.
It was always amusing because it was just a caricature. It really did not sound so much like, the guy I was hearing on 60 Minutes.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's a mistake to make a caricature, try to make a funny caricature out of somebody who's already funny.
Right. That's interesting thought. Huh. So did you ever do an impersonation of your dad? Did your sister? Was it just...
I guess I could do his voice.
Oh, geez.
Sometimes I could do his thing.
But when you were kids, did you guys tease like that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
He'd sit at the end of we'd be having some discussion at the dinner table. He'd say, "Well, I'm telling you, you're wrong."
I love that. And it was a good-natured household. Did your mom sort of roar when you kids were like busting on your pop?
Did she what?
Did she roar? Did she laugh? Would she enjoy the
Oh yeah, it was a
impertinence?
good-natured household. Yeah. He was he worked hard and he was gone a lot. I mean, he was gone before I got out of bed in the morning and came back, came in the door at 7 p.m.
Right.
But he was a fun father. He was kind of, he was wild. He would do dangerous things with us. When it snowed, he put us on the toboggan and towed us behind the station wagon.
God, yeah.
Going up and down the hills in town, and the toboggan would start catching up with the car, and he's
under
got his
the
head
rear.
out the window looking back.
Oh yeah.
He took us winter camping. We built it without a tent.
No, that sounds dangerous.
We had to build an igloo out of snow to sleep in.
To live, to survive the night.
Yeah.
And so, did you do things like that with your kids when they were growing up?
There was no snow in Los Angeles.
Oh, right. That's right. I guess not.
No, not quite like that. No.
Yeah. And so now, while we're sort of at the dinner table, now you do this this thing, the Rooney Report, which is news, all the news that fits on one page, I think
Yes.
you say. Do you and your wife at the dinner table discuss current events?
Yeah, we do. Probably a little too much.
Oh, yeah?
But, yeah, we talk a lot about what's going on. Because, these are very disturbing times.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has us disturbed all the time. And to the point where Cecilia started to say, I can't watch anymore. But I watch.
Do you think it's Trump who sort of got us disturbed, or he really just sharpened the fine point of this ugly stick that was already being formed?
He tapped into a discontent that is out there. There's a whole demographic shift going on. There's a large part of white America that sees itself being replaced. And I don't know how intentionally, maybe instinctively Trump tapped into that.
Right.
But he's good at tapping into anger and discontent.
Right.
And he's also just, he's crazy.
Yeah. I'm nuts.
But unfortunately, he gets so much news coverage because he's so quotably crazy.
Right.
As opposed to Joe Biden, who is a very good president.
Right. But
terrible public speaker.
Sleepy Uncle Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the only thing to do really is to drink and have a cocktail. And you brought something for us to enjoy. What is it that you brought?
I brought a little flask of bourbon.
It's a gorgeous flask. And what kind of bourbon is in there?
This is called Noah's Mill.
Uh-huh.
Here you go.
From somewhere in Kentucky, I'm guessing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Pouring it into your glass. It sure smells good. Well, cheers. Here's to, let's just say, here's to a good outcome in the next presidential election.
I couldn't guess at this point what's gonna happen.
Okay, good. I was afraid to ask which way you'd guess.
There's a lot of room
cheers.
for
Once
things.
again.
There's a lot of time for things to change.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, it's going to be Biden. It's too late now for the Democrats to sort of shift horses, right?
It is too late, and I do wish. I like Joe Biden, but I do wish that he had decided to be a one-term president and stepped aside and let somebody else do it. Because even though I do think he is mentally competent, the stuff about his physical abilities are a little bit overblown. He is 81. He's got some neuropathy in his feet and, bad knees or something like that. So he looks more feeble than he is, and it's unfortunate. But he is going to be 86 at the end of, what could be a second term. And his chances of being able to complete that diminish as time goes on.
Right. And had he stuck to his pledge of being a one-term president, what Democrat would you have liked to have seen right now running for president?
I really like Gavin Newsom. I interviewed him a few times when he was mayor of San Francisco, and I found him to be very direct, likable, answered the questions, very smart. And I like Gretchen Whitmer in, what is she, Michigan.
I was going to say Wisconsin.
Yeah. So next time.
There were rumblings. I mean, as recently as like 6 months ago, that Gavin Newsom was sort of prepping to be tapped to run.
Yeah. And I'm not plugged in enough to politics to know what was going on there. But I'm sure they have their eye on him.
But in the Rooney Report, and it's the RooneyReport.com, right?
Yes. $10 a year.
$10 a year. An amazing, amazing thing. It's a one-pager, really.
Yes.
Of all the news that fits on one page. And it's a great top line. And it says somewhere in there, like, so that when you go to a cocktail party or dinner party or whatever, you can at least not be surprised by the shit that's going on in the world.
Yes, it's basically you read it in the morning and you can carry on a conversation during the day about what's going on in the world.
Right. So where do you find the information and the details, and how diligently do you fact check everything?
Major newspapers, New York Times, L.A., Washington Post, the New York Post, all the wire services, AP, BBC, Reuters, and then the other, I'll see stuff. People might post things on Facebook that I see and pick up and develop something like that. They come from everywhere.
Right.
I don't really have the capacity to absolutely fact check everything. So if there's something I will say the New York Times reports the following, or the Washington Post reports the following. But I can't. I'm not calling the Pentagon and getting them to give me a statement on something.
Right. Interesting. And how often can you find sort of corroborating information that seems to be from different sources?
I'm not sure if I understand that. Usually, for instance, you can look up Supreme Court decisions or court filings in the Trump cases or things like that. Or you can look at Truth Social and see what Trump. So there are just a myriad of sources for things that are verifiable.
Mm-hmm. And do you use foreign things? I know you were a reporter or correspondent for Al Jazeera for years.
No, I don't. I mean, foreign news services.
Yeah.
BBC.
I guess
pretty much.
I guess Reuters kind of counts.
Yeah, Reuters and BBC.
Huh. So what's your process? You are sort of figuring out the day before what you're going to put out the next morning? Yes,
I write at least 80% of it before I go to bed at night, and then I get up in the morning and finish it.
Okay.
And my target is 7:45 publication, but I don't always make it.
Yeah.
And it depends on, because I do try to maintain somewhat of a normal life. And so there are some days if I go out the night before, it's tough to get it out, but I got it done.
Right.
And it becomes, when you've done this kind of thing so long, writing is not difficult for me. I can just bang out stuff. So researching takes more longer than actually writing it.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Huh. And so you've got to winnow it down. There's too many stories to put on this one sheet every day.
I keep an exact. I will not go over 1,000 words.
Okay.
My word processor says 999, and I might stop there. So, and I trim back. And it's funny. It's a fun exercise. If you're 1,045 words, you can trim it down without hurting it.
Right.
You find places where you've been a little bit wordy or you don't need to say that. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
And so how do you get new subscribers apart from like the plug I just gave you?
I'm not very good at selling. I'm terrible at selling. So it kind of word of mouth, post things on the internet. But I wish it was bigger than it is. But I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and how big is it now? How many subscribers?
I don't give out.
You don't.
I don't give out my numbers.
So you don't take advertising?
No. I could probably make more money with it, but I have no interest in doing advertising. I don't want to run a business. I just want to write the thing, report, have fun, and have an audience.
Right.
And that works very well for me.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And the fun is doing this thing that you've been doing for 40 years.
Yeah. Because when I left Network News, it was hard. You realize that the most adventurous part of your life is over, and this thing that you did that so absorbed your life. I mean, I was on call all the time.
Right.
And then suddenly one day it ends. So I wanted a way to keep doing what I do.
And how did the end come about?
The way, we always joked, nobody retires voluntarily at 65 from the mafia or television news. They fire virtually everybody, and ultimately they fired me. They had some cockamamie idea that they wanted to go with digital correspondence. So instead of having expensive camera crews and producers, they wanted to have correspondents who shot, wrote, and edited all their own material.
Right.
And this was so they cut an enormous number of regular correspondents in order to do that. And this was designed by people who had no idea what we did or how we did it. That this was at a time when there was still barely cell phone service in Montana. And the notion that you're going to cover a breaking news story on the West Coast where the deadline is 3:30, not 6:30,
right,
was just insane. And so they fired a bunch of people, me included, and then they never did it. They never followed through on their plan of digital. It was infuriating.
Yeah. Now, it seems like sort of all the major journalistic outlets cover a lot less now than they used to. They have a lot
I can
less.
I can tell by looking, and that they are squeezed for money when they will use a local news reporter in Minneapolis sometimes rather than sending their own correspondent.
Right.
And things. I'm still a fan of network news, but there's some major things wrong. They're paying far too much money to the anchors.
Right.
And I won't give some, but a friend of mine at ABC told me how much the morning news anchor, the GMA anchors were making. And it's millions and millions of dollars.
I was going to guess 10 million.
Oh, no.
Too low.
Too low.
Egads.
Yeah. Peter Jennings was making $14 million when I was, 20 years ago.
That's ridiculous.
So the salaries are much higher now. So meanwhile, they're cutting and scrimping on news coverage while these talking heads are making fortunes.
Right.
And it's just all skewed. But that's what they're doing. And I've become upset about the writing style that has taken over. This present tense gerund style. Donald Trump working the rope lines today, getting out the vote.
Right.
And sometimes I watch CBS News. They're 2 minutes into the show before there's a sentence with a subject, a verb, and an object. and this has happened all over broadcast news.
Why?
I don't know. It's like suddenly why are tattoos so popular now? I don't know. It's this kind of false immediacy. Almost a breathless style. Like it is almost too urgent that I don't have time to get the words out. Instead of, I always aspired to have a kind of elegance in writing whenever I could. The people that I really admired, Charles Kuralt, and I'm trying to think of this guy at CBS. He does their on the road pieces now, which was invented by Charles Kuralt. He's a great writer. He's his
proper
sentences.
sentences.
English sentences.
Right. I'm just thinking about that, this gerund style, which as soon as you
It's
said it, I'm
terrible.
like, all right, I hear that.
Yes, and
But,
you hear it everywhere.
what they're taking out, you say Donald Trump getting out the vote, they're taking out the verb was. Donald Trump was getting out the vote earlier today.
Was, did. Yeah.
Yeah, but usually they're reporting on something that already happened. Donald Trump was getting out the voter, and it's a past tense sort of
But they'll report it in the
reportage.
present tense.
Yeah, Donald Trump getting out the vote leaves out that past tense thing. I wonder if that makes it seem more appealing to people. Like, oh, you're right there with it happening.
Well, that's what I say. I think it's a false sense of immediacy and
Right.
urgency. And I just find it grating on my ears. As much as I like to watch the evening news, it just drives me crazy.
And what evening news do you watch?
I watch CBS. I worked for ABC for all those years. Can't stand to watch them anymore. And I have this loyalty to CBS. I did my homework with CBS pencils, and
Oh,
and I
that's
did
funny.
work briefly for CBS after ABC.
Right. And CBS was 60 Minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, 60 Minutes is
Okay.
on CBS. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
So when you were a kid, did you go into the CBS offices with your pop? And
Oh yeah.
sort of-
Yeah.
yeah. That must have been kind of fun, stealing pencils and letterhead and stuff. Right?
Well, I never stole them. He brought them home.
Yeah. You borrowed them. You're going to return them someday.
But it was fun. Yes, he would. And he wasn't working on the evening news, but he'd take you around the building and
Right.
into the evening news, bullpen, and Cronkite was there, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember going in. My dad worked in the city. He was a chemical salesman, and going into the office, it was the coolest thing,
Yeah.
because there are all these desks with all these like office supplies, and it was just a magical place to be. And there's nothing like home.
Yeah. I always felt a kinship with CBS, and I worked for the company for 3 years. When I was in Chicago, it was a CBS-owned station, so my ID said CBS. So when I was in New York, I could walk into the building on my own without my father.
Love that.
Yes.
So over the course of your long career as a correspondent and a journalist, what are the stories you really wish you could have covered but you didn't get to?
Oh boy. Boy, that is a tough question.
Oh, good.
I mean, there were a lot of things that went by. I guess I never covered, not that I really wanted to do politics my whole life, but I never covered a political campaign, a national political campaign. That would have been fun to be with the boys on the bus,
Oh, right.
and on the airplane. I did take one trip on Air Force One, and don't even ask me who was president at the time, but I got sent in the press pool on Air Force One, and that was fascinating to see how the White House press corps works. But I couldn't do that all the time.
How come?
I would find it confining, and I respect these people who they really know their politics and they know what they're doing, but I wanted to get out, out in the West and be in the wildfires and in the mountains and going from city to city, and instead of when you're covering a campaign, you're in a tight confines. You go where the candidate goes, and you're in the bullpen, and it's a different kind of life. It's just it's a great, exciting thing, but it's not something I wanted to do.
Right, and hard to find a unique angle, I guess, when you're in the same place as everybody else all the time.
Yeah.
So you're out west, and you talk about the things you like to cover. You covered the O.J. Simpson trial, is that right?
Not so much the trial as early on, when leading up to the trial, we all had to do stories about what's going on, and that reached a point of absurdity because we were under a mandate to do an OJ story every day.
Egads.
And so I remember one time I had weekend duty, and there was no court proceedings, there were no developments, there was nothing. I ended up doing a story about O.J. Simpson's dog. The Akita who was barking during the murder.
Oh, God. Well,
I ended up using the line, "If only a dog could talk." It wasn't my best day in journalism.
so when you're writing that, are you sort of chuckling out loud?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would try to sneak things in. I was irreverent. I would try to, get a fastball past the desk. You could do it on weekends. It was hard to do with world news. You couldn't get one by Peter Jennings very often.
Do you remember some of the slipperiest fastballs you created?
Not really.
Yeah.
We used to joke, if the video was bad, you'd satellite the video to New York, and the technician, the New York would say the video's bad, and the technician would say it looks good leaving here. And one time I got in trouble. Somebody put a bomb in the car of Navy officers down in San Diego. It was a big incident at the time. and it was Hawaiian shirt day in the office, and I wore a Hawaiian shirt. And suddenly this thing happens, and I had to go to San Diego, and I got a wrinkled shirt out of the trunk of my car and put it on and went down, and I was on television. And the executive producer sent me a missile saying, your shirt was wrinkled. And I emailed back, it was pressed leaving here.
Nice. So of the stories you've covered and written about, which ones stand out in your mind as sort of like being just really good writing? You're like, wow, I was really on that day and on that story.
I think I was happiest with some of the things I did for Nightline. When you had, most of the stories for the evening news were like a minute 40, a minute 50 if you got something really big.
Right.
Nightline, you could go on for 4 or 5 minutes and really do something, with playing with both the video and the word, and the sounds and what people said and then what you get to say. I did a story about street dancing in Oakland, or I did a story about this guy, Vova the juggler, who was, America's best juggler at the time. A story about juggling. For
Nightline.
Yeah. Or I'm a skier, and there's this guy named Glenn Plake, who is sort of the ambassador of skiing, and he wears, what's that from the London?
A mohawk?
It's 10 inches tall, and he's bald on the sides, and he's got 10 inches of hair,
right?
Spiky hair, colors, and skiing with Glenn Plake at Mammoth Mountain, and skiing and shooting a story, stuff like that. That's the kind of thing I say when where everybody else is, I'm in the wrong place.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that sounds pretty fun. So
yes, yeah, and that's what made it just the greatest life, that to get to do stuff like that, and somebody would pay for it, and
right.
and also doing the breaking news stories. They would spend so much money, they'd complain about it, but money was no object. When they said you got to go get this story, man, they just sent camera crews and people and hotel rooms. I mean, the money we spent. Like say in Middle East wars, and we would rent entire we had a couple of hotels in Baghdad. I was there during the kind of the civil war in Baghdad when the American occupation was there, and we had drivers, we had gunmen, we had hotel rooms, and they just paid.
And when did that start to change, and the money for that kinds of stuff just sort of start to dry up?
Well, when I got fired.
You were the problem.
Well, things like that were like big budget busters, and then there would be tightening after major incidents like that. But there were always these up and down cycles of kind of waves of layoffs and firings. And I used to tell Cecile, I said, this is coming. I am not going to reach retirement age on this job.
Right. And how old were you when
I was 58?
Okay, so you didn't quite reach retirement age.
Yeah.
Huh. But now you're doing the Rooney Report.
Yeah.
Which is spectacular.
TheRooneyReport.com, $10 a year.
Thank you. It's really, really good.
Thank you.
And it's so terse. I mean, it's a bite-sized nuggets of essential information.
Yeah, with a little bit of, I try to stick a little bit of wit and fun into it, but irreverence.
And where is sort of your circulation? Is it centered around New York? Is it centered around?
No, it's all over the country.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's good. And you do nothing on social media to try and expand your...
A little bit, not enough. I'm not good at self-promotion.
Right.
I'm terrible.
But certainly there must have been some kind of self-promotion when you were in the ranks of journalists at these various outlets.
No, and I think that was kind of a flaw in my career.
Okay.
A personal flaw. There are a lot of power dynamics. Certainly, there was in network news, and I was always somebody who, even though I was kind of irreverent in the office, I was never angling for power, and I always thought, do a good job and they'll recognize you, which is just totally naive.
Right.
Because it's the people, and I saw this earlier in my career, it's the people who asked for things that got them.
Right.
You were not. I remember I was so naive. I remember being shocked when I was a newspaper reporter. I saw a fellow reporter who was pretty mediocre, and she asked to be made an editor, and they made her an editor. And I thought, what? You can ask to be made a boss?
So were you emboldened to ask to be an editor, or did you not want to be an editor?
No, I didn't want to be in charge of anything or anybody. I didn't want anybody to be in charge of me either, but that was a...
Right. So now, after all those years, you kind of found the perfect job.
Yes, I'm my own boss.
Yeah. Though you are in charge of every freaking thing.
Yes.
For the Rooney Report.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's okay.
And your wife is a writer of some renown, and you're a wonderful writer.
Yes.
Do you ever call on her to edit your stuff or give you an opinion on?
She'll tell me some stories. I don't want her editing my stuff, but she'll give me tips on stories, things she's seen, or sometimes she'll tell me that wasn't clear or that wasn't funny.
Like after it's already gone out?
Yes, unfortunately afterwards. But
well, that's what you get if you don't want her editing it.
No, I know. I get what I earn.
It's not called editing. It's called critique. And does she ever come to you for input on her writing? She's a creative writer of fiction, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And short stories.
She's written an astounding stuff. Several screenplays. She wrote a play that played in Los Angeles for several months, and now has somebody like 25 years ago. Now it's somebody interested in producing it as a screenplay. So she's been laboring over a rewrite of the screenplay for the past year.
Right.
And she's working on a novel at the same time. She's much more focused than I am. She has the ability to stick with it much more than I do.
Yeah. Is that how come your memoir is at 250 pages and holding?
And unfinished, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. How many pages will it be when it's done, when it encompasses?
Probably not a whole lot more.
Right.
It's maybe another 100. I don't know.
And so are you writing it chronologically?
Well, mostly. It's sort of by blocks of experience. I started with the end of my career. I sort of bookend it with the end of my career.
Do you know the first sentence?
In the end, I was fired.
Nice. Okay, good. I want to read more.
I had this experience. Ever see broadcast news?
Yeah.
So there's that scene where they fire this guy and they ask him, "Is there anything we can do for you?" And he says, "You could die very soon." So I got called over to a hotel lobby in Burbank, and these two women are there to fire me. And we go, like, okay, fine. And at the end, one of them says to me, "Is there anything we can do for you?" And I'm thinking, and I said no. And I walk away and I go to my car and I'm thinking, I've heard this before. I've lived this before. What's the right
answer?
Is there anything we can do for you? And then it dawns on me, broadcast news, you could die very soon. And I realized I had blown my moment.
Your big chance. All right, well, had that thought popped into your head, do you think you actually
I would have said it.
You
yes,
would have.
I would have said it.
Because you were pissed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you remember the hotel in Burbank?
No. I could probably look it up, but I tipped the valet $50 and put it on my expense account. Yeah, it was some and they did it in the lobby, so that I wouldn't climb over the table and choke them.
Right.
So,
but they were just like, errand people sent to bury
well,
the
they
hatchet.
were upper echelon. They weren't the president of ABC News, but
Okay. And you'd worked with them in the past, and
well, no, remotely.
Right.
One of them almost never. See, that was the thing. It was a very hierarchical organization. Like, say, Roone Arledge was president of ABC News,
oh right,
and he was like the Wizard of Oz. He didn't talk to the people who worked for him. I think he dealt with the anchors, Barbara Walters and Peter Jennings and stuff like that. He didn't talk to people like me. One time in Saudi Arabia, we had a room that was for, we had water and sodas and near beer in the room. And I go over there to get a bottle of water, and Roone Arledge is in there. And he's at the back of the room. And I had never talked to him. Not even when I was hired. I had
Right.
not talked to Roone, my boss. So he's there in the back of the room, and he recognized me, and I said, "Oh, Roone." And he says, "Oh, Brian." And then I see this look on his face, and his shoulders are moving back and forth, and he's kind of looking like a way to get around me.
right.
And since I had played hockey, I knew how to stop him. And I just started playing with him a little. I realized this guy does not want to talk to me. Here we are in Saudi Arabia on the brink of a war. The president of CBS News or ABC News doesn't want to talk to one of his reporters. So I start shifting back
So
and
you're
forth.
toying with Roone Arledge.
Finally, I let him go.
I love that. How long did you toy with them?
30 seconds or so. Just
That's a long time.
yeah. I wanted it to hurt.
That's funny. And I wanted it to hurt. And how long after that did you get fired?
Oh, many years. 20
Oh, okay.
years.
Too bad.
18 years, something
Yeah,
like that.
like a
Because
week.
Roone had died by then.
Okay.
Yeah.
What a funny position to be in, and sort of in this ivory tower, and not have to deal with really the people who are doing the actual work.
There were vice presidents that to this day, I never knew what they did. They held positions. And this is the part of the whole thing that I objected to and that I rebelled against, that, once, twice a year, you'd have to go to New York and do what we called the Stations of the Cross.
Fealty.
And talk to show producers. And there were people who were vice presidents of ABC News who never talked to me about a story. This one was good. You screwed up on that one. Here's an idea, something you should do. There was one vice president in particular, the odious woman, who only wanted to talk about who was sleeping with whom and that kind of thing.
Page 6 stuff.
Yeah.
Is it like that at the Hudson Valley Pilot? And what do you do? Are you working with the Hudson Valley Pilot? Are you on the board?
I'm on the board. I'm not writing or reporting for them. I don't want a job.
Because you've got the perfect job now.
Yeah. Well, Mark First, the publisher, asked me to come in for, editorial advice.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's a wonderful publication, and you're a wonderful journalist. And thank you so much for being here. We're out of time. Can you believe it? It always goes so fast.
It was fun.
Brian Rooney, thanks for being here. Everybody, don't forget radiofreerhinecliff.org, the fundraiser. There's a donate button right there. Have a fabulous Friday and a great weekend.
The RooneyReport.com, $10 a year.
Oh, is that it? Good. Thanks for bringing the bourbon.
You're welcome.